Well, hi, and I hope you're having a good day today so far. I'd like to talk to you about discouragement, and I'm going to deal with several characters in the Bible that face discouragement. We all do. One was a fellow by the name of Elijah. Now, he had been to the mountaintop, so to speak. He had a mountaintop experience. He had called down fire from heaven. He defeated the prophets of Baal. And boy, you'd think that nothing would have brought him down now, but something does bring him down. And this great man Elijah gets discouraged. In 1 Kings 18 and verse 45, the Bible says, "And it came to pass in the meanwhile that the heaven was black with clouds and wind, and there was a great rain. And Ahab rode and went to Jezreel, and the hand of the Lord was on Elijah. And he girded up his loins, and he ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. And Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, and withal how he had slain all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger unto Elijah, saying, So let the gods do to me and more also, if I make not thy life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. And when he, Elijah, saw that, he arose and went for his life, and came to Beersheba, which belongeth to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and came and sat down under a juniper tree, and he requested for himself that he might die, and said, It is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am not better than my fathers. Now, notice how down he was. Notice the despair that Elijah was in, and how rejected he felt, and how discouraged he was. Many years ago, there was a fellow by the name of Parker Tucker. Parker Tucker was a chaplain, a prison chaplain. He was in the prison system of Atlanta, Georgia. And for whatever reason, this great man, a great Christian, in fact, got down, really down. And he walked around in a fog for about a week and a half. And he felt like just, there was this cloud over his head as he walked around. And he said, I just can't get over this. I don't know what's wrong with me. And he walked by a funeral parlor. And remember, this was back in the old days, and evidently there was a mortician there with a sense of humor, but he saw a sign on the funeral parlor, and it said, Why walk around half dead when we'll bury you for $69.50? Of course, Brother Tucker just laughed within himself, and he said, That's so true. Why should I, as a child of God, walk through life half dead? Now, have you ever felt that way? And probably there's not a person in the past week in some shape or form who hasn't experienced some form of discouragement. Maybe it was job problems. Maybe it was a problem with the kids. Maybe it was car problems. Or maybe it was problems with a friend. Or maybe it was just fatigue. You know, you just get tired in the day in and day out grind. Maybe it was financial trouble. Maybe it's been marital problems. Maybe it's been health problems. Maybe it was just some disappointment. Someone let you down. But for whatever reason, you've gotten discouraged. And it can happen to anybody. And sometimes it doesn't have to be for some apparent reason. I don't know about you, but sometimes there's just a cloud over me, and there's no reason for it. It's not that anything is going horribly, but there's just this cloud hanging there for whatever reason it might be. Well, we find in 1 Kings chapter 18 a great man of God. His name is Elijah. He's one of the greatest in the Bible. And you would look at Elijah and you'd think that nothing could discourage him. You would look at Elijah and say, this guy's bulletproof, you know? And you would look at Elijah and say, now, there's a man with great faith who eventually is going to go into heaven even without dying. And I've been to the place actually near ancient Jericho where the chariot came down to get him. So here's a man who makes a cameo appearance in the New Testament. He shows up alongside of Moses and another great man in the Old Testament, by the way, and talks with Jesus himself. And they talk on the mountain of transfiguration. And that's how great a man Elijah was. Probably, I think he's one of the two witnesses in the book of the Revelation. And yet, here's Elijah. And we find him back yonder in the Old Testament wanting to die. And saying, Lord, I've had enough. Get me out of here. Come take me away. I don't want any more of this. I just want to die. Well, you'd say, Pastor, what led up to this? There's nothing that I could think of, honestly, that would tie in with the discouragement. I mean, here's Elijah, and for 3.5 years he's been out in the desert, and God's been feeding him miraculously, intervening with this raven. And finally it's showtime. And God says, go show yourself to Ahab. And now there'd been a drought up to that point. But now it's time to have a showdown on the top of Mount Carmel. I've been to that place too. And this showdown is going to break that famine. It's going to break that drought. And Elijah says, now Ahab, here's what you need to do. You get your prophets of Baal. There's over 400 of them. And it's going to be them against just me. I'm going to be the lone wolf. I'm going to be the lone ranger. And we're going to meet on the top of Mount Carmel. And we're going to make altars for each of us. And we'll put each of our sacrifices on a separate altar. And the God that's going to answer by fire is going to be God. It's about time we stop horsing around here. How long halt you between two opinions? Who's God here? If it's Baal, well, let's worship him. But if it's Jehovah, let's worship him. And the God that answers by fire, we are going to worship him. Well, they got up there on top of the mountain of Mount Carmel, and Elijah says, now you guys go first. So the Baal prophets, they make their little altar and they put their sacrifice on it, and they spend hours trying to call down fire. Nothing happens, not even a little wisp of smoke. And Elijah says, look, you guys are hurting yourselves. Oh brother, let me show you how it's done. So he has an altar built and he puts a sacrifice on it, and he makes it challenging to God. He says, let's go get some water. Now remember, it's a drought, so they don't have any water in that area, but the Sea of Galilee is nearby. And so they bring buckets of ocean water up and they douse the offering. And then Elijah prays the simplest little prayer. It takes a matter of a few seconds, and it thunders down fire. And it licks up the wood, it licks up the water, the rocks, the trench, everything. And all of a sudden the people are saying, Jehovah is God, Jehovah is God. Now, you take a look at this and you think, this is revival time. Elijah is famous. In fact, he'd never be wanting for another preaching engagement for the rest of his life. I mean, every synagogue in Israel is going to ask him to come and preach these week-long meetings for him. There's going to be big love offerings. Everything's going to fall into place. And you'd have thought that Elijah would be on the top side. But that's not what happened. Elijah gets discouraged. And you would probably say, why? That's a good question. Why do we get discouraged? Now, I mentioned a number of reasons why this can happen. But we have those times, and maybe you're going through one even right now, maybe one today, where you just say, I got this cloud over me. I don't know why. I don't know what's going on in my heart. Why do we get discouraged? But more importantly, how can we get victory over it? Well, I'm going to be talking about this for the next several days. I'm going to look at several other Bible characters as we talk about dealing with discouragement. Join me back here tomorrow. And with that, have a great day.
When we asunder part, it gives us inward pain, but we shall still be joined